Hello, and welcome to our webinar on the 10 most frequently asked questions of medical review. My name is Jennifer Boniface, and I am one of the registered nurses with the Provider Outreach and Education team. And I'm joined today by Mary Sue Gardner, who's also a registered nurse on our team and will be co-presenting with me during this event. Additionally, we have some other members from our Provider Outreach and Education team here on the line with us who will be assisting with today's event. So today's webinar will focus on the top 10 questions we receive related to medical review. So have you ever wondered what questions providers ask most when it comes to medical review? You're not alone. Today, we're going to dive into the top 10 questions we frequently get asked. These are the things that are on many providers' minds. So in this session, we'll go through each of these questions, share some helpful tips, and point you to useful resources to help you stay on track. So by the end, you'll feel more confident with documentation and billing and better prepared for medical review. Our objective for today is to provide guidance and resources to address the top medical review questions and improve Medicare documentation and billing accuracy. And we'll accomplish this by sharing the top questions received from providers and suppliers, explaining the answers and clarifying key medical review concepts, and highlighting resources and tools to help you find the information you need quickly. So before we move on to our questions, let's start with a brief overview of medical review and its functions. Medical review, or MR, is the process Medicare contractors use to examine clinical records and supporting documentation to ensure that payments are only made for services that meet Medicare's requirements for coverage, coding, and medical necessity. This process focuses on areas where data analysis has identified potential risks, vulnerabilities, or unusual billing patterns. The overall goal of medical review is to reduce improper Medicare payments by ensuring that services billed meet Medicare coverage, coding, and documentation requirements, and by identifying and correcting errors related to medical necessity and claim processing. Contractors support this effort by analyzing data, sharing information, taking corrective actions, developing local policies, and educating providers to help address and prevent future billing issues. Medicare administrative contractors perform both prepayment and post-payment medical reviews to help ensure claims are accurate and properly handled. So let's start with our questions. The first question is, what types of medical reviews are performed by WPS? And we conduct several types of medical reviews to ensure that Medicare claims are accurate and compliant with regulations. These reviews identify and prevent payment errors related to coverage, coding, and medical necessity. The main types of medical reviews performed by WPS include Targeted Probe and Educate, or TPE, Prior Authorization, or PA, and Automated Reviews. And as we move through the presentation, we will briefly discuss each of these types of reviews. Our next question is, what topics are currently under TPE? So let's start with a little background. The Targeted Probe and Educate review process is conducted by Medicare administrative contractors to ensure the accuracy and compliance of Medicare claims. TPE uses data analysis to identify providers who may be at risk for fraud, waste, or abuse based on their billing patterns. The process typically involves up to 3 rounds of prepayment or post-payment review. After each review, the provider receives educational outreach to help them understand and correct any issues related to coding, documentation, or billing practices. This education aims to reduce further errors and help providers comply with Medicare requirements. If a provider's denial rate remains high after completing the 3rd round of TPE reviews, the case is referred to CMS for further investigation and potential corrective action. And this may result in additional audits, penalties, or even referral to fraud investigation, depending on the severity of the issues found. The ultimate goal of the TPE process is to educate providers, reduce billing errors, prevent fraud, and ensure Medicare resources are used efficiently and appropriately. So how do you find topics for TPE? I'm going to go to our website and show you where you can find this information. So on the home page, you're going to go up to the top of the page and click this drop-down menu that says Topic Center. Here you'll see various topics listed, and we want medical review. At the top of this page, you'll find a clickable link right here that says Targeted Probe and Educate Review Process. This resource offers a helpful overview of how the process works. So I'm going to open it up now so we can take a quick look to see what it includes. And I've also included a link on the slide to this resource for your reference. So this resource begins with discussing what the TPE process is, what you can expect during a TPE review, and then finally some resources to help you out should you have some questions or want further information on any TPE review. So now I'm going to go back to the Guides and Resources section, and we're going to look at the Targeted Probe and Educate drop-down tab. So right now we are in J5 Mac Part B, and I'm going to go to that drop-down. So when you click this drop-down menu, you'll find materials for all the topics currently on TPE review. And again, we're looking at the J5B jurisdiction. When you select a topic, it will open to a dedicated guide with detailed information. And for example, let's look at annual wellness visits under J5B. So each guide may include background information on the topic and the scope of review or what the review is looking for, documentation guidance for the topic, and then links to additional helpful resources. You'll also find links to educational opportunities, including our live events page, which is right here, that clickable link right there, so you can register for upcoming events, and the encore presentations and medical review, targeted probe, and educate playlists on our YouTube channel. So let's quickly review the Part A and Part B TPE topics for both jurisdictions J5 and J8. So this is J5A, and here is our topics for TPE for J5A. And again, you can go to the top and switch your jurisdictions and your lines of business by clicking these on the top. And again, we'll just briefly look at J5B. We looked at that a few minutes ago. And here's J8A. And finally, J8B. And at the bottom of this slide, I've added a link to the WPS YouTube video that provides you with a quick overview of the TPE process. So our third question asks, what services are needed, or what services need to submit a prior authorization request? So before we dive in, let's take a quick look at prior authorization. Prior authorization is the process Medicare uses to approve certain services, treatments, or procedures before they are provided and covered. In other words, before a provider delivers certain services to a beneficiary, they must receive approval confirming the service is medically necessary and meets Medicare coverage requirements. If prior authorization is not obtained, Medicare may deny payment for the service even if it was performed. This process helps ensure that the care is appropriate, necessary, and cost-effective. It also helps prevent unnecessary or inappropriate care, as well as fraud and abuse, ensuring that Medicare funds are used efficiently. However, prior authorization only applies to a limited set of services, including specific Part A hospital outpatient department services and certain Part B repetitive scheduled non-emergent ambulance transports. Now let's take a look at the prior authorization tab on our website. The process is very similar to what we just covered in TPE. Let's go to a fresh page. And again, you're going to go to the top. You're going to go to Topic Center, Medical Review. So first, let's scroll down to the Prior Authorization tab, drop-down tab. So this tab contains information for the prior authorization topics. When you click on a topic in this tab, it will provide you with specific resources for that topic. And again, we can switch between jurisdictions by using the options at the top of the page. So here is J5B. I'm going to go back and just show you J5A, the topics on that one. J8A, and then finally J8B. So we're going to stay in J8B and look at this prior authorization tab a little bit more. So here we have several resources, one titled Prior Authorization, another titled Prior Authorization for Hospital Outpatient Department Services Overview, and a third titled Prior Authorization for Repetitive Scheduled Non-Emergent Ambulance Transport. So we're going to click on the Prior Authorization resource to view a list of current topics. So for J5 and J8 Part A, the Prior Authorization Program applies to certain hospital outpatient department services. Specifically, this program is relevant to HOPD billing using the 13X type of bill. It covers only the following services, and you can see them right here: blepharoplasty, botulinum toxin injections, pendiculectomy, rhinoplasty, vein ablation, cervical fusion with disc removal, implanted spinal neurostimulators, which are also called spinal cord stimulators, and facet joint interventions. It's important to note that prior authorization only applies to certain hospital outpatient department services. Other services performed there or services provided outside the hospital outpatient department do not require prior authorization and are not eligible for it. For services not included on this list, coverage will be determined on a claim-by-claim basis based on medical necessity and policy guidelines. And for complete details on this program, please refer to the resource titled Prior Authorization for Hospital Outpatient Department Overview. And there's a clickable link right there. For Part B, the Prior Authorization Program applies to Repetitive Scheduled Non-Emergent Ambulance Transports, or RASNAT. According to CMS, repetitive transports are defined as 6 or more one-way trips during a 10-day period, or at least 2 one-way trips per week for at least 3 weeks. And this requirement applies to Medicare Part B billing for RASNAT services under the codes A0426 for Advanced Life Support Non-Emergency Transport Level 1 and A0428 for Basic Life Support Non-Emergency Transport. And additional information on this program is available in the resource Prior Authorization for RASNAT, which is right here. Additionally, for an overview of this process, including details on submitting prior authorization requests, please view the Encore presentation titled Prior Authorization Overview, and a link has been provided on the bottom of this slide for your reference. Another question we receive is, what are automated reviews? Automated reviews are claim determinations made by systems without human intervention using available electronic information. According to the Medicare Program Integrity Manual, Chapter 3, Section 3.3.1.3, when a claim is denied automatically, it must be based on clear policies such as a statute, regulation, national coverage determination, or local coverage determination that specifies when a service is not covered, incorrectly coded, or improperly billed. If there's a clear policy or a medically unlikely edit in place, MACs can deny the claim right away, even if documentation is included. Automated reviews are also effective at catching simple mistakes, such as when there's a typographical error. These reviews help process large volumes of claims quickly and accurately by identifying patterns of common errors, saving time and reducing mistakes. So now I'm going to turn things over to Mary Sue, who's going to walk us through some additional frequently asked questions.
Thanks, Jennifer. Jennifer's going to stop sharing her screen, and I'm going to start sharing mine.
I apologize. I'm trying to stop sharing it. It's not working.
You're all right. I might be able to just override you there.
Here we go. Hold on. Let me see if I can stop right here. Oh, thank you.
Okay. And I think I was able to override you.
Yes.
And I'm going to, just as Jennifer did with me, I'm going to verify with her that my audio is showing and my video is showing and that my audio is loud and clear.
I can see your presentation and I can hear you clearly.
Perfect. Okay, thank you for joining us, everyone. My name is Mary Sue Gardner, and I'm the other registered nurse on the Provider Outreach and Education team. So I'm going to be the other presenter on this half of the webinar today. I'm going to switch gears a little and talk about the portal and the MR questions that relate to the portal, starting with how to submit documentation in SNAP or Secure Net Access Portal, which I'm just going to from now on refer to as the portal. So appropriate use of the medical documentation function would be for prepayment reviews on which you would receive an ADR and post-payment reviews or probes. Under the prepayment, additional documentation requests are actually sent when we need more information to make an initial claim determination, such as when the provider's on a TPE or a targeted probe and educate. So if you get an ADR request, providers have 45 days to return the requested documentation. And if no documentation is received in that 45-day time frame, the claim will automatically deny. Now, probes are post-payment reviews, and those are used to decrease provider burden, identify and prevent improper payments, reduce appeals, and even improve the medical review process. But there are situations where you would not want to use the medical documentation functions in the portal. And that would include when the PWK segment is being used, and this is when you submit an electronic claim and then you complete that PWK segment, which actually allows providers to notify us, the payer, that additional medical documentation, something like, you know, a surgery note, is being submitted by mail or fax to support the claim's medical necessity. So you're doing that in advance. Other times when you would not want to use it is when records for the FIS reason code U5601, which that's an overlapping dates of service. So if that occurs, you would not want to use the documentation submission option. And then finally, redetermination requests. Now, I'm not saying that you can't submit your redeterminations via the portal, but you have to note that that's not under the documentation submission section for medical review. Appeals actually has their own area in the portal, and that includes information on how to submit, you know, in the portal as well. So before uploading any documentation, you need to determine if Medicare is conducting a prepayment review or a post-payment review. And this is to avoid processing delays or possible claim denials. You must select the correct type of review when uploading your documentation, and that's why I'm stressing that so much. So you will find the information in the letter that Medicare sends you requesting the documentation. If your letter indicates it is an additional documentation request or an ADR, then we're doing a prepayment review. So if your letter indicates Medicare is conducting a post-pay review and that letter contains a list of selected claims, then it's a post-payment review. All right, so this slide contains some reminders about the file size and submission. The portal will accept files in the formats that are listed on this slide for you. The portal can only accept one file that is 100 megabits or smaller. If you have more than one file to send, those can be put into a zip file. So, but please do not put more than 60 files into a single zip file. WPS staff cannot accept documents that are password protected or contain macros or any external links. And you can actually find more information about this on our website as well. So now there's a couple of ways to access and upload the documentation and the documentation screen. The first option that you see here is from the claim search screen. Now this screen would be accessed by selecting the claims button, which is right above the medical documentation button on your homepage of the portal. After you enter your NPI and the patient Medicare number and the date range, claims that meet the criteria will then be displayed for you. Under the action header, you're going to see 4 acronyms, and they're real little on the screen here. And that's the FCS, or the Finalized Claim Summary for, and this is Part B claims only. OCA, which stands for Overpayment Claim Adjustment. CER, and that's for clerical error reopenings. And finally, MR is for medical review. Now, in this example, all of these acronyms are gray, which means none of them are options that are available for me right now. If the acronyms are blue, that means that action may be taken by the user on that, for that claim. MR, which is what I have shown here with the red box around it, would be available for pending claims where an ADR has been sent. Now, I can only use a test platform, or I'm subject to using screenshots that come out of the provider or the portal user manual. So that's why, you know, I can't show you live claims, so I can't show you exactly what that would look at. So the second option here is to select the plus button that's next to the medical documentation under the transaction tab. So this can be done if you've received an ADR or a notification letter for a targeted probe and educate review that's being conducted. Here you're going to see information that's going to be required based on the type of review that's being conducted. So if medical review is conducting a prepayment review, the system will require your MPI, the patient's Medicare number, the claim number, and the date of service. For post-payment reviews, you'll need to provide your NPI probe number, patient's Medicare number, and the claim number and the dates of service. Your ADR letter or MR notification will give you the specifics of what documentation needs to be submitted. But these are the required components that you need to have on hand before you're even able to upload the documentation. So I wanted to make that quite clear. Be ready and armed with this information when you first log into the portal to do your documentation. So if you chose that plus button next to medical documentation, it's going to open the medical documentation upload documents screen. Now here's where our test environment may look a little different from what you may see. Again, I don't have access to a live environment, and we could not even share that if we did. So in the portal, you'll have 2 radio buttons with the options to choose prepayment review or post-payment review. So after making your selection, the appropriate boxes will appear for you to enter the required information. When I select the plus button, I'm automatically taken to the prepayment review, so a box asking for the probe number does not appear for me. I do want to call your attention to the blue banner that's up here at the top of the screen. It reminds you that if you are submitting an appeal, you should not send your request using the medical documentation function. Appeals and medical review, again, are separate departments with separate upload areas, and they have their own function, own functional area, which we actually covered in a webinar on 4/28. And you can review that encore of that webinar from our YouTube page if that's something you're interested in. So if you, again, we're in the claim summary screen and selected the MR acronym, the fields would be populated for you. If you chose the plus button, you'll need to enter that information. So just depending on which way you go will depend on if information automatically uploads or not. If you have access to more than one NPI, make sure you select the correct provider from the NPI drop-down box. And then again, enter the patient's Medicare number, the claim number, the date of service, all of that. And then select that large blue upload right here, file or bar, and that's going to allow you to attach your documentation files. So here's where also things will look a little different if you're uploading documentation for a post-payment medical review. For post-payment reviews, you have the ability to submit documentation for up to 400 claims per submission. So at the bottom of the screen, you'll see that you'll have a button on the left side that reads Save and Submit Another. And on the right side, there will be a button that says Save and Finish. Both of the upload options will give you a chance to verify the information you're sending is correct before you submit it. But keep in mind, I have to show you screenshots from the test environment or from the portal user manual, so I may not always even have the clearest images, which you'll see here. All right, so after the documentation has been uploaded, you're going to receive notices of successful submission along with a confirmation number. In that upper right corner, you'll see this notification can also be printed for your records, or you can start a new submission, or you can return to the home page. So that's what those options would look like. As we move on, our next portal question is, how do you submit a prior authorization request in the portal? So under the Transactions tab, you're going to see the option for prior authorization and the little plus sign next to it, so you would select the plus sign. That action is then going to open up a new request form, and the first thing you need to do is select your NPI from the drop-down box. If the supplier or facility's NPI does not appear in the drop-down list, you will need to request access to that NPI before you're able to submit for that NPI for your prior authorization request. So to request that access, you would need to choose the My Profile function where you find the option to request NPI access. After you choose the correct NPI, you will choose the service for which you are requesting the prior authorization. So the drop-down box will list the outpatient hospital services that require prior authorization, and this example we have on the screen. After the service is selected, you will select the appropriate radio button to indicate whether the request needs to be expedited or not. Now remember, expedited requests should only be used when the standard time frame for making the decision could seriously jeopardize the life and health of your patient. Moving on, the next section of the form is going to be the facility information. These fields should be auto-populated based on the MPI that was selected at the beginning, but you're going to want to verify. Information for the beneficiary receiving the service is next, and it includes first and last name, Medicare number, date of birth, and the sex of the patient. As we move down the form, we will find a section for requester information. The majority of the fields here should also auto-populate, but you want to make sure that you, as the requester, you're adding any kind of title or any of that additional information like your phone extension that doesn't auto-populate. You'll need to have information for the physician that's performing the service. Their first name, their last name, the physician NPI, PTAN, as well as their address. And fax numbers are optional, but we encourage it so we can send notification to the physician's office if we need to. The additional information section is where you will add details about the procedure that will be performed. Here is where you're going to provide the anticipated date of service and the type of bill. If the request is approved, the prior authorization then is valid for 120 days. If the actual date of service is different from the anticipated date of service, you don't need to file a new request. A new request doesn't need to be submitted as long as you're within that 120 days of that decision. If you're beyond that 120 days, you would then need to submit for a new request. There will be a drop-down box where you will select the applicable HCPCS codes and CPT codes, and the codes shown will correlate to the service that you entered in this preliminary information as well. So below the HCPCS CPT fields, there will be fields where modifiers can be entered if they apply. If you need to enter a number of units, that field is available there as well. If you have any other pertinent information that can be entered into the additional information field, we encourage you to type that out as well. So at the bottom of the screen, you're then going to see a button that reads Add Row. If a provider is going to be performing more than one procedure that requires prior authorization, or if the provider may be changing the procedure interoperatively, choosing Add a Row is going to allow you to enter information about that additional procedure. If there is a question as to the exact procedure that may be performed, it may be best to submit a request with several potential service codes to avoid receiving a denial due to no prior authorization. So if you feel like once the physician gets in there, it may be one procedure, it may be another based on the findings, request both of the CPT codes for prior authorization. This is what it would look like if you were adding additional rows. The same information, but you would select the additional CPT that's on that list for services that require prior authorization. Remember, this again would be in the event that the procedure has a likelihood of interoperatively changing to a different procedure. You would continue to add any necessary additional lines. However, it would not be correct to just select all of the procedure codes that come up in that range, that come up under that procedure code list, just as a precaution. That would not be appropriate. You should only be requesting the ones that you anticipate doing or have a likelihood of being. So once you enter the anticipated date of service, the type of bill, should already be populated. You're going to choose additional procedure codes, again, from the drop-down list. You're going to add any modifiers if those are applicable. You're going to enter in all the information that's necessary for each CPT line. And then you're going to move on if you're done, or if you've messed up and you need to delete a row, you can do that as well. But you continue to add for the amount of CPT codes you anticipate. It may be this or this. All right. So then the next section of the form is for uploading your documentation, and there's some notices that are listed on this page that give you additional information about the file size that you can attach. So make sure you pay attention to that. We also cannot accept attachments, again, that are password protected or contain macros or anything like that. So make sure that that doesn't exist. And then remember, if you need to attach multiple files, you must put them into a single zip file containing no more than 60 individual files. And that information, again, is all included. WPS does have a resource on our website that will help you determine the type of documentation that should be included. And I'm going to have Jennifer add that into the chat. You can find information on the services that require prior authorization and what type of documentation should be included for each service and additional information on our website. And you'll also find links to LCDs for individual services if those services have a corresponding local coverage determination. All right, you're then going to be asked to provide an electronic signature by marking that you agree. And if you do not accept, you will not be able to submit the prior authorization through the portal. So you have to agree. So after you select agree, you will review the information you have entered. To review the information, you can just click on those arrows next to each of the line and review the information. And then if any errors are found, there will be an option to edit so you can make corrections before you formally submit. Once all the information is correct, you can then choose the submission button. So users will receive notification of successful submission along with a confirmation number. So the options shown here are then to either print the confirmation message, start another prior authorization request, or you can select done if you are complete, and it'll take you back to your home page. So the next frequently asked question our MR team receives is, where do I find additional documentation request letters for targeted probe and educate reviews? Now this information is under the notices tab. So let's move on and take a look at how to find these. So to go to the notices heading on your home screen, and you're going to click on the ADR letter button. When the ADR letter page appears, you're then going to be able to select the ADR letter search. So let's look at what that looks like. So when the ADR letter search appears, you're going to want to use the drop-down boxes to select the following information, which would be the service location, NPI, the date range, which is, you'll have the option for like 2 weeks, 1 month, 2 months, etc. And you're going to want to click on search then. Then the portal's going to display the ADR letters that match your search criteria. After the portal displays the initial results, you can narrow the results further by using the filter options. And you're then going to want to click on the eye, like the eyeball icon, and the letters will display along with buttons to go to the claim detail or to submit medical documentation. So there's going to be buttons available to print your letter, to go back to your search, to perform new search, or to click done and be taken back to the home page. So here, if you click on the claim detail button, you're going to be taken to the claim detail page with additional actions you can perform. So you can see the claim section under the user manual for additional information. If you want more information on that, you can go out to our user manual. So the next thing would be to click the Submit Medical Documentation button to upload your medical documentation for an ADR. So of note, if you are a DDE provider or you have elected to view ADRs in DDE only, the letters will not be available in the portal for you, and you will not receive a paper letter either. If the ADR letter is not available for viewing in the portal, you can still respond through the portal once you receive your paper letter by mail or you review in DDE. So again, providers are not required to respond to the ADR through the portal. You can view and respond to ADR letters using the method that best meets your criteria. And then you can click on the additional documentation request or ADR instructions link on the letter search page for more information about options for responding to ADR letters. All right, so as we move on, the next question about the portal is, where do I find the nurse review findings for TPE? Those finding letters are located under the Transactions tab for medical documentation as well. To find your TPE decisions, you're going to want to filter on the completed status code. We will move on to the next slide and show what that looks like. So again, sort by completed, find the MPI for the claim. You'll need to search for decisions rendered after you submitted the documentation. So make note of that date. A decision is normally rendered by us within 30 days after the documentation is submitted. It's 30 days or sooner. The response is going to be from OB user in the submitted by column. So that's what you're going to see as like the username. You'll need to make sure the My Submissions Only box is not checked when searching for decisions. And then once you locate the record you wish to view, click the eyeball icon for the details. You may also be able to view the documentation submitted by clicking the link under the file name. This option may not be available for some claims, especially those that are older. And you can then find and open the nurse review findings. You use that little eyeball icon. And this letter then gives you details about the decision as well as resources to regulations that support the reason the denial was made. So if you choose to appeal a decision, the appeal guidance is also contained within this letter. As we move on, the next question we receive is, where do I find the status and decision of a prior authorization request? So after you submit a prior authorization request through the portal, you can monitor its status and view the decision letter within the portal. And you would begin by clicking on the prior authorization under the Transactions tab. The search options available will display along with all the prior authorization requests that have been submitted under that NPI you have access to. The results can then be narrowed down by using the filters or by entering the information in one of the search fields. So those are confirmation number attached to the authorization request, the type of request, MPI, facility, the submitted by information and submitted date, the patient's Medicare number, the status of the request. So you have all of those options. So then again, whoops, got my cart before my horse. Clicking the eyeball icon in the actions column, so that's over here. And I know some of these screenshots are blurry and I do apologize for that. It's just what we have available from our user manual. But by selecting that eyeball icon, it will then pull up the current record, and it's going to show the prior authorization status, the prior authorization decision, and buttons to the decision letter, and to be able to view the record history. So that's going to look like this. If your request is affirmed, you're going to see that there's a green check mark after prior authorization status and before the word completed, and a green check mark here after the prior authorization decision and before the word affirmed. If the request is not affirmed, you can resubmit the request to provide additional information. And then you would click on the resubmit button, which is going to open the prior authorization request form, and it's going to be pre-populated with the details from that previous request. You will not see the resubmit request button if the decision is affirmed or if it's rejected. So then you'd want to edit any information that needs to be corrected and attach any additional documents on the resubmit request form, and then click the review button at the bottom of the page. If all the information is correct, you click the submit button. If edits are required, click the edit form button, and then save and submit button when you've finished making those edit corrections. When the resubmit request has been successful, when it's successfully submitted, a confirmation number will be given, and then you can click on the done button and be taken back to your home page. If a request may be rejected, I should say a request may be rejected if it's something that doesn't require a prior authorization request, or if there are missing details about the request. For example, if it is not a CPT code that's in the list for prior authorization, or in the case of certain HOPD services that require prior authorization, if a request is being made for a place of service other than HOPD, those are all types of reasons that a request would be rejected. Finally, if the prior authorization request form does not contain all the required information, we can reject a request for that as well. So make sure all those fields are completed. The rejection letter also gives details of the reason for that rejection. So remember, don't waste your time submitting stuff that is not on the prior authorization process just because you feel like you need to. You do not if it's not part of that process. You're just going to get a rejection letter on that. Now, before I turn things back over to Jennifer, I want to show you how you can do a quick prior authorization request on our website. Let me quickly pull that up. And I'm going to go to WPS. I'm going to pull this over. I am going to ask Jennifer if you can see my screen, if you're seeing the website.
Yes, I am.
All right, perfect. So on our homepage of our website, we have this nifty new feature, prior authorization search. And you can go without logging into the secure section of our website. And here's the login information for the secure section of the portal, otherwise known as SNAP. And you can do a quick search on your prior authorization request. So you would have to populate in all this type of information. You would have the drop down for what type of prior authorization request you're looking for. And then you would hit the search, and we'll go back to the screen share of the PowerPoint, and I'm going to advance a few slides ahead. Few too many. And then this is what would pop up. And so it would give you results of that search. If the request was affirmed, here you can see on the bottom, this one was affirmed, and it would give you that quick information. So that's just one additional way to look for the status of your prior authorization request. So at this time, I'm going to stop sharing. I am going to turn things back over to Jennifer. She's going to start sharing again, and we'll finish out the additional questions. Jennifer?
Okay, thank you, Mary Sue. So our final question is, why do I submit feedback on the MR? Oh, let me move this. I apologize. I've got something on my screen. Our final question is, why and how do I submit feedback on the medical review process? And providers are encouraged to share their feedback through the CMS Qualtrics survey page. Your input helps us better understand your needs, experiences, and challenges. By completing the survey, you provide us with valuable insights that guide us in identifying areas of improvement, refining our processes, and ensuring our services are more effective, responsive, and aligned to what matters to you most. So the provider outreach and education surveys are used to measure satisfaction with your educational experience, including feedback on how we can improve and topics of interest for future educational events. So in contrast, medical review surveys focus specifically on your experience with either the targeted probe and educate process or the prior authorization process. And medical review uses that feedback from these surveys to identify opportunities for changes and improvements, helping to streamline the process for the providers. And you can find links to these surveys on the bottom right corner of the medical review topic webpage. So let me just quickly show you where you can find that. So if you look at the guides and resources, when we went through the topic center, medical review, guides and resources, and you scroll down about midway down on that page, right here in this box, here's our prior authorization survey. You can take that link, click that link there, and here's the targeted probe and educate one. And I've also included those links to the survey and the titles of the next two slides. Now let's take a look at the survey so you can see exactly what we're asking. And we're going to start by going over some questions in the Targeted Probe and Educate survey. So questions include, which round of TPE process did you just complete? How satisfied or dissatisfied are you with your experience during the TPE review process? Considering all services provided by WPS overall, how satisfied or dissatisfied are you with us? And how can we improve your next TPE review experience? The survey also includes optional questions on topics such as details about the type of TPE audit identified, satisfaction with the clarity of the decision letter, the professionalism and knowledge of the staff, and usefulness of the educational materials, feedback on any information medical review staff may not have clearly explained, suggestions for improving the educational materials, whether you understood the TPE results letter, and recommendations for making the letter easier to understand, whether we may contact you with further follow-up questions about your feedback, and your contact information and additional provider details. The other MA survey we will discuss is the prior authorization survey. And the questions on this survey are similar to the questions asked on the TPE survey and include, how satisfied or dissatisfied are you with your prior authorization experience? Considering all services provided by WPS overall, how satisfied or dissatisfied are you with us? And how can we improve your next prior authorization review experience? The survey also contains optional questions covering topics such as details about the service type of the prior authorization request and how the prior authorization request was submitted to us. Was your prior authorization request affirmed, non-affirmed, or rejected? Satisfaction related to the ease of submission, clarity of decision letter, next steps provided, usefulness of educational materials, professionalism of staff and knowledge of staff, whether we may contact you with follow-up questions about your feedback, and your contact information and additional provider details. So let's wrap up this webinar by discussing some of the educational resources offered by Provider Outreach and Education on our YouTube channel to help you enhance your understanding of medical review. To navigate to the YouTube channel, start by visiting the WPS YouTube homepage, and a link to that has been provided on the presentation slide. You can also access recordings from the past 60 to 90 days through the Training Center on the WPS website under the Encore Presentations tab. So you have several options on the top of this page that I want to point out. The Videos tab displays all of the content that we have educated on. The Playlist tab organizes the videos by topic. On the right, you'll find a magnifying glass or a magnifying icon that lets you search for educational videos on specific topics. And for now, we're just going to focus on that Playlist tab, which is where we are right now. So this page features playlists covering many of the topics we've educated on. And I'd like to highlight a few that are especially useful for medical review. The titles on the next few slides link directly to each of those playlists. So our first playlist is medical review. It includes a variety of medical review topics, such as targeted probe and educate and prior authorization, so you can easily find what you need in one place. The next playlist is targeted probe and educate, and it contains education related to a range of TPE topics, along with general guidance on the targeted probe and educate process. Our prior authorization playlist provides education on current prior authorization topics, along with general guidance on the prior authorization process. Our fourth playlist is policy. It contains education related to all things policy, including local coverage determinations and national coverage determinations, as well as recordings from previous Contractor Advisory Committee meetings and proposed local coverage determination open meetings. The next playlist I want to highlight is documentation. This playlist features educational content on a wide range of topics related to properly documenting Medicare services. The sixth playlist is benefits and coverage. It includes recordings designed to help you understand benefit and coverage criteria for various Medicare services. And the last playlist we will mention today is Encore Presentations. This playlist contains the Encore recordings for all the current presentations performed by Provider Outreach and Education. So to wrap up today, let's discuss that we covered some of the most common questions providers have about medical review and shared practical tips, clear guidance, and helpful resources to support you along the way. Our goal was to help improve the accuracy of Medicare documentation by breaking down key concepts and pointing you to tools and resources available on our website. Moving forward, these resources can help you stay on track, avoid common mistakes, and feel more confident when handling claims and documentation. So as a recap, during today's webinar, we answered common medical review questions with tips and resources, clarified key medical review concepts, and provided resources and tools to help you find necessary information easily. So we're now at the end of our formal presentation. Please remember, if you have any questions, please put those questions in the chat. So before we get to those, Mary Sue is going to answer a few questions that were submitted ahead of time. So the first question we received is about claims. It asks, can you complete a claim reopening and correct a provider MPI when the denial reason code is solely GBB03?
Jennifer, thanks. Yeah, so denial reason code GBB03, that's defined as documentation submitted, does not support that the services were rendered as billed. So if you receive this denial reason code and feel that your services, the services you provided, do accurately reflect what was billed, you would then need to submit a first level appeal or a redetermination to WPS. If you also need to make changes to that NPI, you would then submit that with your appeals request that the appeals department make those changes as well. And I know we are at time. There's a few additional questions, and if you have the availability to stay on and listen, that would be great. Otherwise, if you need to drop off, we understand, and you can always go back and listen to these on the encore of the event. We just have a handful of questions we're going to go over. So Jennifer, I'm sorry, go ahead.
No worries. So our next question is about medical necessity, and the question asks, what are the biggest medical necessity issues?
So when considering medical necessity errors alone, I would say the top things are not meeting medical necessity for prior authorization services on the first request. That would probably be the leader right now. Then I would probably say it goes to skilled nursing facility services and then our outpatient services. So when it comes to the physician side, it would probably the leader would be not meeting all the requirements for the E&M code build.
Okay, and our third pre-submitted question asked, what are some tips for documentation and billing compliance?
All right, so documentation doesn't need to be a book. First of all, I want to say that. We need good quality documentation that really paints the picture of the services being rendered. So if there is an LCD, make sure you are following the LCD requirements. If there are documentation requirements listed within a policy or a manual or on our website, make sure your documentation contains all of those required components. Further, make sure your documentation is an accurate reflection of your bill. Remember, if it's not documented, it's not done. And we can't just pay you Medicare money in good faith that you provided something. So you really must support your bill within your documentation. Also, when it comes to billing, make sure you are following all of your claims processing regulations, as well as knowing how to accurately report your billed codes. Some codes require time. So if we ever review the service and time is a component of that code, we're gonna look for time in your documentation. So your coding handbooks in this case should also be followed. So next question, Jennifer.
Okay, and this is our final pre-submitted question, and it asked, what is a frequently made mistake in preparing records for a medical review request?
Well, there's a few here I'd like to discuss. First would be not submitting all of the necessary documentation. I'm a little tongue-tied. Let's take an easy example of SNF. A skilled nursing facility is basically paid on a predetermined daily rate, and that's based on the assessment of that beneficiary and their needs. Some of the information needed to complete an assessment actually happens before the actual skilled nursing facility stay, while that beneficiary is in the hospital. So that's called a look-back period. We need to see the look-back information to make sure the beneficiary was accurately assessed and classified into the appropriate HIPS code that's reported on the bill. So next would be when submitting your documentation via the portal, not paying attention to like file size limitations or any submission errors that come out of making those portal submissions. If you're not paying attention to the size limitation, you might not be transmitting everything that we need for a review. So just make sure you're following those size guidelines. Not submitting timely. So remember, once your ADR hits, you have 45 days to submit that documentation. And I really encourage you to go with a 30-day time frame, because if you miss that deadline, you're gonna receive a no documentation denial. So that would be a CARC code 50 or a RARC code M127, or in this DDE you may see a 56900 denial code. So you would not resubmit that claim in this case. You would need to make a redetermination request for those. So Jennifer, is that the end of our pre-submitted?
Yes. Yes, that is. And we appreciate you staying with us. I know we were touched over, and we really do want to thank you for staying with us as we cover this topic, but we're going to move on. If we didn't get your question during the presentation, we will follow up with you after the webinar. So please take a moment to complete the survey and share your feedback. We use your feedback to develop topics for future education events. And you can access the survey by either clicking on the link in the chat or by visiting the CMS Qualtrics page after the webinar. In a few minutes, you will receive an email, which you probably received already, thanking you for attending, which includes your certificate of achievement and a link to the survey. If you need contact hours for continuing education, they'll also be in that email. So if you don't see it, check your spam folder. If you called in, email us at wps.gha.education@wpsic.com with that webinar name and our phone number, and we'll send you our U.S. Certificate of Achievement. If you think of any additional questions after today's event, you have 7 days from today to submit them. So send them to their education mailbox at that email address, wps.gha.education@wpsic.com, and put the title of this webinar in the subject line. However, if you have claim-specific questions, please direct those questions to our customer service department, as we don't have access to your claim information, and we're therefore unable to look up your claim. And also remember, we can't accept any type of PHI or PII via email. Finally, on behalf of myself, Mary Sue, and all of Provider Outreach and Education, thank you for attending today's webinar on the 10 most frequently asked questions of medical review. As a reminder, this presentation will be posted as an encore presentation on the Training Center page of our website. Remember to take the survey with the link provided. We look forward to your survey comments and hope to have you join us at future events. You may now disconnect.